Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks to the organizers and Josh and Carla and the whole team behind this opportunity for us to learn together. It's really quite special to be able to do that and have the chance to think about what we all can do together to promote the best conditions for our young people, particularly in the middle school years. And I will start my presentation by acknowledging that I am a middle school survivor. Middle school was, in my entire pre-K 12 experience, or pre-K 16 experience, probably the worst time of my life when I think about it. And I had my own 360 middle school experience just this morning when I realized, having gotten very late last night from the East Coast, that I packed one set of slacks and the wrong jacket to show up in. And then I had a printing snafu, so I said, wow, this is triggering lots of neural pathways that I thought I was way beyond. So I am deeply identifying with the millions of middle school children or young people who went to school this morning scared, who went to school this morning not knowing who their friends are, who went to school sick, who went to school this morning with a father or mother in jail, who are dealing with forces that I don't think anybody in this room, frankly, given the state of our society, can't even imagine what so many of our kids are going through. And so they count on us to be there for them. They count on us to be empathetic and caring and to do right by them with the best knowledge and with courage and with fortitude. And so thank you for being here for them. So I'd like to try to round out what we heard this morning. Such great presentations. Thank you for setting me up, and I hope for setting the room up for success today. To apply a little bit of a practice and policy lens to this conversation, so that might be a little bit of a thread throughout the day. And so I have a question, which is, are we on the precipice of a whole child revolution in this country? And I certainly think and hope that we are. And so it'll be exciting to see how this plays out and to know your perspective on that question throughout the day. So as the teacher and principal that I was, I'd like to start off with some learning goals for the day, so I hope I hit the mark. But I have 3 basic learning goals for my short conversation today, and just make sure I keep my time so I don't run over. All right. 1, I want to explore some of the initial findings of what we call the science of learning and development that I believe, and the organizations that I work with, known as the Science of Learning and Development Alliance, believe hold transformative implications for the redesign and transformation of our systems and our structures to benefit all students, particularly to make sure that we achieve equity and excellence for every single child in this country. Secondly, I'd like to discuss some of the key barriers that are real barriers that you, I know, in your work every single day are grappling with, that are undermining this potentiality for change, but also some of the opportunities to address those barriers so that we can achieve transformation for all of our kids. And then finally, going to end with some thinking about what are some of the supportive practices and policies that we can incent and that we can catalyze within our systems that'll enable us and all the educators who are here today watching at home, and the ones that you work with. And when I say educators, I mean any adult who's working in any youth-serving system, education system, healthcare system, juvenile justice, wherever they are. If they're working with kids, they're educators at some level. How we can effectively enable them to promote the conditions that's going to allow for whole child education and support that unleashes the potential of all of our kids. So I shared with you a little bit about what it was like for me as a middle school child. Between my 5th grade and 8th grades, my parents broke up. I discovered my queer identity, and I gained 50 pounds. And so my own middle school experience was just really not the best place and the best time in my life, though I was resilient. I learned how to be resilient, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So that's why I'm here today. But I want to give you now, and also if you're watching remotely, a little bit of an opportunity to remember what it was like for yourself. So first, I want you to think and feel because this is an integrated experience, our lives. Think and feel about how you learn best. Now I want you to think and feel about your own middle years experience and what that was like for you. And now I want you to think and feel about one aspect of that experience that was positive and long-lasting. Now finally, I want you to think about one aspect of your middle school experience or your middle years experience that was not positive and stays with you to this day. So now take 30 seconds to turn to somebody to your side, to your shoulder partner, and share what that positive experience was and what that negative experience was. Thank you for that. Okay. Hopefully everybody got a chance to share. And now that you've done that, you've actually opened your mind. And if you weren't already feeling this way and thinking this way, you have become more empathetic to the challenge of the children that we're focused on today. You have become more relationally connected, which we know is what it takes to deal with the setbacks that our young people are experiencing every single day. So you have, at some level, now bonded with the millions of kids across the country who need our help and who need our support. And I want to ask, just to make it a little bit interactive, because that's the teacher that I was, would somebody like to share what one of those positive experiences was and why? What brave soul?
I made some very close friends who I am still friends with.
Wonderful. Friendships. Excellent. Would somebody like to share? Yes, ma'am?
I was part of a club at school where we used to do visits to do service in many different spaces, and that stuck with me. So in the skills that I developed, I used everything.
The context that you were in mattered to you. Who would like to share, if you would be so kind and brave as to do so, what one of the negative experiences was for you that still stays with you to this day? And there's a microphone, so those at home could hear too.
I'll share one negative experience. In middle school, in 6th grade, I was 6'1". And in 7th grade, by the end of 7th grade, I was 6'2". One negative experience, and it was my fault, was walking after school with some of my friends, and I bumped my head on the speed limit sign. I did not see it. And it was very painful, and some of my friends started laughing, so I started laughing with them. But I enjoyed middle school. But that is one negative experience, and it was my fault. I'm sorry.
And I should note there are lots of people, like my mom, who was a middle school teacher for 37 years, loved middle school. So it's not a uniform experience for sure. One more person to share their negative experience?
I have to share it in the context of my positive. So I did this math formula on the board, and the teacher just acknowledged how bright I was, which for me was because I never thought of myself as smart. And so, but the negative of that was that the students started bullying me because they said, "You think you're smart now." And I would say to this day, I don't like to be called out. If I do something positive, I'm real resistant about getting outward accolades for that.
Yeah. What meaning you made of that experience, and it still stays with you. That's pretty profound. Thank you very much for sharing and for sharing with each other. That I think it was useful to situate ourselves in that lived experience of ourselves, but also of those that we are working to support. Let me ask you to take a quick 30-second look at this picture. It's a pretty typical 5th grade math class. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that was the slide I missed, but we walked through that experience. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Think about what is enabling this cooperative learning experience to happen. Think about all that goes into setting up, and if you were an educator, you know what goes into setting up that kind of opportunity for young people. Think about the academic skills and cognitive skills that those young people have to bring to bear, the self-regulation skills that they have to bring, the collaboration skills. Think about the social, relational skills they're bringing to this experience. Think about the emotional skills for someone who doesn't think they're very good at math, or for someone who's dyslexic and has a hard time understanding the symbols and the representations on the piece of paper. Think about the things you don't know about these kids. You don't know what their family structures are. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know if they're coming from poverty or hunger or affluence. And these are the kids that we work with every single day, that we ask our 3 million plus educators to help and support every single day. Now I want you to zoom in and focus on him in particular. And the reason I zoomed in is because in the American experience, we've typically over time and over the generations since we've had schools in this country, focused on groups of kids, cohorts of kids, batched typically in age-centered batches. Sometimes, well, back in the day it was boys and girls, but now we're co-ed, but still very much, by age, not necessarily aligned to their particular developmental period in life. And think about now the transformative opportunity, but risks of focusing on that one child, and what that means for our work, and what that means for practice and for policy, versus focusing on just groups of kids, or maybe you don't have to know every single kid very well, or maybe what's happening at home is really not the business of school, that's for somebody else or some other system. But when you focus on the single child, and you believe and you understand that your responsibility as an educator or as a youth service provider is to make sure that that individual child has the opportunity to know, to discover, and then to enact his unique potential in life, I want you to think about the mindset shift that entails, particularly in the American context, because that's where we are. And as I'm going to discuss in just a moment, context matters. So, we all come into this work in different places and in different ways, and some of us have an education perspective, some of us have a health perspective, some of us come because we have a moral calling, or because, things worked for me, so I want other things to work for other people. I used to teach American history and government in high school, and very, very compelled by the, what you might call the American, founding story. And so this might not be everybody's entry point, but we can't deny that how our nation was founded, the values and the traditions under which it was founded impact our context today. And so I want you to think about, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and what that means for that individual child, and how that shapes how we think about our work. So quickly, I want to discuss the challenge before us, because I think it's really important as we have this conversation today that you are very clear, we are all very clear-minded about the challenge before us. And the fact of the matter is that our education systems and our related youth serving systems were all created in different times for very different purposes that are no longer meeting and increasingly not meeting our challenges or our moral imperative to support every single child individually in this country. They were organized around a mythical average student, and then they penalized kids, or they rewarded kids, sometimes unfairly, depending on what group they belonged to, based on the deviations from that average. Our systems still to this day, implicitly and explicitly, continue to perpetuate deep racism and oppression against certain groups, activate stereotype on a regular basis, and our systems are infused with implicit bias. And then they enable, or I should say they situate adults who are good, well-meaning adults to enact that implicit bias in their work, even when they try not to. And then finally, building off of the knowledge from Phyllis and Joanne, they are not designed to appreciate or to incorporate what we're learning about the fundamental nature of human learning and development that needs to infuse all of our systems if we're going to be able to do right for groups of children and for individual children as well. So I will suggest today, as we talk about all of this, that we need not reformation of our systems, we need transformation of our systems. There's a silver lining, though. We have an opportunity. Mental models in this country are shifting. People today, young people and adults, want different things from the system than it was designed to deliver. They want equity, they want fulfillment, they want social-emotional skills. Parents are now reporting in surveys that the number one thing that they want out of schools, you may be surprised to know this, is for schools to promote their children's mental health. The number one thing, not test scores, not grades, not graduation rates, mental health. It's a fundamental sea change transformation. And because policy and practice are in flux, there's an opportunity to change that. If you look at the Iceberg model here, if we can change those mental models, that is where the greatest leverage in our opportunity for transformation exists. And what we know from the science of learning and development is that this knowledge, some of which that Joanna began to discuss in her presentation, is becoming much more infused throughout our system. It's become much more disseminated. And I think, and I know I'm running really short on time here, but I think it does stand to discuss these really quickly. So what the Science of Learning and Development Alliance is here to do is to translate this humongous body of knowledge into very practical, tangible ways for practitioners and policymakers to think about it. Because knowledge by itself doesn't change anything. We need to see this in practice and we need to see it in policy in order to incent different behaviors among the adults in our systems. And so what we know from the knowledge, or from the science of learning and development, is that every child, no matter who they are, no matter where they are in their developmental starting point, has great potential. There is no bell curve on potential. Brains, our young people's brains, particularly at this age, are remarkably malleable and built for resilience. I liked what you said, Joanna, about being uniquely fit, right, to take advantage of this opportunity for learning and development. Every child is an individual. They learn differently, moving along unique pathways in life. There is no normal or average learner, no matter what anybody told you or what we're telling our kids today. Learning and development build along a continuum. Integrated experiences, integration promotes learning and development. So learning is not just about academic or cognitive skills. It is social, it is emotional, it is relational, it is physical, all at the same time. Kids make meaning by building on the experiences that they've had before. It's not isolated. We need to understand that. And two in particular, and this is where your thinking about your own experience came often into play, context is the defining influence on development. Your context, the context that our kids are in. There is no such thing as a person who learns out of context. And then finally, strong, trusting relationships are the fuel for learning. We all learn in social groups. That is what enables us to learn, to make meaning, to come to understand our identity. Relationships are essential. And so we've developed this graphic because we want to enable practitioners and policymakers to have a new lens. Imagine if every single teacher walked into their classroom with a little lens, a little, Orphan Annie decoder that had these around it, just like that, and what they could do to strip away the mindsets that they have been inculcated with from their own educations about what's possible for kids. Quickly, let me just say that we are not starting at zero with practices. We know from research and from good evidence and science about practices that actually promote positive learning and development among all children, no matter who they are, where they are, or where they come from. And so those are about supporting positive school climate, social-emotional development, productive instructional strategies, and the system support that all of you are here working on and making sure that all of our kids have. So we do know how to do this now. It's about making sure that our systems reflect this knowledge and these good practices. From a policy perspective, it's really important to think about 5 dimensions of policy. One, about setting a whole child vision. If you're a system leader, if you have any agency in making change, think about what your systems or your organizations are there to do. Are they about the whole child, or are they about parts of children? Think about that. So it's really important to think about how you center a whole child vision, and then what that means for transforming the settings, the contexts in which our kids are learning and developing. Think about what it means about organizing and leveraging the resources that you have in a different way, to support instructional strategies that enable all children to develop who they are and learn most effectively. And then also think about the adults in the system. The adults need critical attention too, because they are coming to this with their own context and their own understandings of this process. So really important. Think about that. And then, you know, as we talk about our different policies and practices today, you have to think about funding. You have to think about how we support people in this work. You have to think about how we align our resources and how we re-envision how these systems are set up. You have to think about the laws and the regulations that say this is what you should do and what you should not do to cause no harm for all of our kids, to make sure that we're handling them with care. And then we also have to think about, and I think this is what this meeting is all about, what are the systems of knowledge sharing that we're developing that are intentional, so that we can bring this knowledge into policy and practice and not just suggest that knowledge by itself is going to change anything. So before I close, just so you know, the Science of Learning Development Alliance is a growing national partnership of organizations that fundamentally believe that this is true, that we can transform our system, that there are no average learners, bell curves are bad for kids. The science tells us that, and now it's our responsibility to make sure that as we do our work, we're no longer asking kids that it's their job to beat the odds, because that's all about a bell curve. That's all about rank order, and that's really bad for kids. It's really our job to make sure that we're using science, we're using knowledge, we're using our courage to change the odds on behalf of all kids. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to our panel, and I want to open it up now for discussion.